Is it normal to get mental blocks on skills that you already have or have already been doing for a while?
Yeah, so that is a mental block. That is a true mental block, is when you develop a block or you are no longer to perform a skill that you've mastered. So if you
Okay.
think about it, there's three levels of development in any sport or any skill. So there's the beginner level where you don't know anything. So you have to really build up the strength. There's a lot of direction that goes into it. So think about the first time you ever tried a back handspring. It's like, okay, sit this way. Like even just like here's how
Yeah.
you sit, here's where your arm. Like there's a lot of direction, a lot of pieces to that skill, and so you're thinking a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. But then you
Hmm.
eventually master the concept of the skill, and you become an intermediate where you're just tweaking. It's like okay, jump a little harder, pull your hips a little bit more, squeeze tighter. So there's small adjustments that happen, and so there's less direction when you think about that skill. It's like, okay, let me think about some bigger pieces that'll help me master it. And then you get to the advanced or the elite stage. That's where you've
Hmm.
got it. That's where that muscle memory kicks in. And that's where your confidence is built, your trust is built, and you're doing the skill on your own and you've got it. So
Yeah.
sometimes what happens is athletes in that stage where they've mastered the skill, they try to over control and correct because most of the athletes who develop I would say all the athletes
Mhm.
that develop mental blocks are more perfectionist. They have this
Yeah.
perfectionist ideals about how things need to look and feel. And so sometimes they start thinking like a beginner or an intermediate in a skill that they are technically an elite in. And so that's
Mhm.
really where the challenge starts. And that's why the pressure builds, the fear builds. And so that's really why mental blocks, happen for skills that you have mastered is because the thinking, you're not focusing on the right things. There's a lot that goes into it. So if it's a
Okay.
brand new skill that you're blocking on, you're not actually blocking, you're just still learning. And there are still great techniques I teach athletes to help build up your trust and your confidence to be
Hmm.
able to throw it by yourself, but it's not a true mental block. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And how do you get over the mental block to get the skill back in the end?
Yeah. So I mean, I have a whole process. I have a mind over mental block process that's 6 steps that I take athletes through in my programs to help them really master how do I overcome this mental block. But I'll kind of go through just the 6 steps so you have the big picture. So the very first thing is releasing the pressure. So these athletes, a mental block comes because of a buildup of pressure and fear. And so the very first step to overcoming a mental block is figuring out how are you putting pressure on yourself? Where are those sources of fear? Where is that coming from? And addressing those in a way that's lasting. So that's the very first thing. A lot of athletes skip that part and they're like, fix me. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, give me the technique, give me the tool, give me the coach, give me the thing
Yeah.
that's going to make this better. And they don't address the underlying issues or the causes. It's like putting
Okay.
Band-Aid on a cut when you need stitches, right?
Yeah.
It's not gonna be lasting and it's not gonna heal the right way. So that's the very first thing we do with athletes. The second step is to improve your focus and to figure out how do you think about the skill without overthinking. That's a really big
Okay.
thing because if you ask athletes, what do you think about when you work on your skill? Most of them do not have a good answer for that. It's like, doing it, not falling, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the second thing is teaching them how to think without overthinking in their skills. The
Mhm.
third step is really building up that confidence and teaching them to believe in themselves again. Because as you know, with mental blocks, what happens over time is there's this defeat that happens consistently, and so your confidence takes a hit.
Okay.
And that's really hard to overcome a mental block when you're not feeling good about yourself, when you don't have that belief
Hmm.
built up. So addressing their confidence and that belief, teaching them that confidence is something that it is not earned, it is practiced. So teaching them how to do that is really important. The next step is dealing with all the social pressure. So figuring out how do I operate and interact with other people on my team and my coaches and my parents without letting their expectations put more pressure on me. And so
Yeah.
that's really huge. Most of the athletes we work with are 10 to 14. And the reason why is because that's when that social approval and that the social media, they get phones. So that
Yeah.
judgment factor is going up. But
Yeah.
the
They compare.
comparison, yeah, it's huge. So that's a huge thing that we work with our athletes on is doing it for you, performing for you. How do you process things from your
Mhm.
perspective in a healthy way without putting pressure on yourself from others? And then we talk about visualization. How do you prepare for success? How do you see past the block? That's really important. And then letting go of mistakes, staying positive when things aren't going the way that you want them to. Because it's frustrating when you walk in and in the first few reps, you know how the day's going to go. and
Yeah.
you just get defeated within the first few reps because it's like, oh, well, it's just not a good tumbling day or it's going to be a bad day. That's not helpful because you've still got 28 minutes of the private lesson or whatever the case may be to
Yeah.
work to improve and progress. So that's kind of the 6 steps of my program, and that's really what athletes need to improve in and get tools and skills to develop those different pieces to overcome mental blocks. And that's what we do.
Okay. That's really good. It's nice,
Yeah.
lengthy, and um, I guess like a very technical process, or it goes in certain steps. So that's good
Yeah,
and seems more achievable as you keep going through each step.
it does. And a lot of people, they don't, the go-to approach for dealing with mental blocks is let me do more privates, let me do more classes, which, yes, like doing
Hmm.
more reps can be helpful, but if they're not thinking and like if they still have those same old thinking patterns that got
Yeah.
them into the mental block, if they still have those while they're working through privates, then they're
Hmm.
not going to know how to get out of it. So they're just literally
Yeah.
showing up every single practice, hoping for a good day. And as a
Hmm.
mental coach, there's so many techniques and strategies and tools that we have and that we have time to develop. A lot of coaches, they
Yeah.
even if they have the skills and the tools, they don't have the time. They've got a team of, 30 athletes that they're working with as opposed to this one athlete needs a very specific, intensive, program to overcome this mental block. So that's really where we come
Hmm.
in as mental coaches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that doing more privates and more classes, um, and not getting any mental coaching help, do you think just trying to have a good day over time is going to make it worse because you kind of keep your training in the same mindset over and over? Does that
Yeah.
make it worse?
So it's just kind of reinforcing those
Yeah.
those same patterns and beliefs and hoping for a good day. Sometimes what you'll see is athletes will change gyms or they'll try a different, like they will mix up their external environment or try a new drill or something. And
Yeah.
sometimes that helps and that works. And the reason why that works is because there's no old negative stories attached to that, right? Because
Hmm.
when they go in and they do the exact same thing every single class or every practice, it's like, okay, well, I go to this mat, I go to do my tuck, and nothing happens, right? Like they have this story and this negative experience attached to that drill or that skill. Versus if they're doing something brand new, there's no expectation, right? It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. And so there's not as much pressure and it's new. So that's exciting. It causes them to be a little bit more interested and lean in a little bit more,
Hmm.
have more energy to push through that fear. So sometimes that is helpful. But if they're just going in and just trying to get as many reps as possible with the same old thinking patterns, it's not going to help. You'll see kind of this trend where when it gets close to competition season or tryout or evaluations or choreography, that the
Hmm.
pressure builds and more mental blocks set in. Like a lot of setbacks happen during that time.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of athletes push through it on the day, right? Sometimes the fear of
Yeah.
not making it becomes bigger than the
Yeah.
fear with the block. And
Yeah.
so that definitely happens where, you'll kind of see those patterns. And so sometimes after competition season or when that high pressure time in the season goes down, then they'll see a little bit more progress. So you will see progress
Okay.
over time by sticking to the same thing. But mental coaching is really where you're addressing the mental block at the source. So that is the fastest and most effective way to overcome mental blocks and learn how to overcome them. So in the
Yeah.
future, if it happens again, you know what to do versus just
Mhm. Yeah.
trial. It's like, oh, it got better and I don't know why. That's why
Yeah.
athletes mental blocks come back
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
because they don't know why it happened and they don't know how they fix it.
Yeah.
So it's literally
Yeah.
just like something they feel like they have no control over, and that's not part of that is like it is something your brain is doing, but there's so much you can do to work through it
Yeah.
and do it in a really healthy, effective way. So
Yeah. So once you have the tools, you can apply it
yeah.
to everything else, really. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell our athletes and our parents, like we teach them the baseline. Like, here's what works. So when you work on this skill, here's how you're going to think. Here's how you're going to process the situations you're in so you don't have pressure. Here's how you're going to have your confidence. How you're going to practice it and keep it high. Here's how you're going to trust yourself. Here's what you're going to do if you have a challenging day or a challenging rep. Here's how you're going to get through it. Like we give them all of those pieces so that if they ever have a day where it's like, ooh, something's shifting, things are feeling harder, it's like, oh, let me go back and look at those things that are working and let me reset back to that healthy baseline. That's kind of what we do. We teach them, here's what works, like here's what really works. And so
Yeah.
they have that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So if someone found this helpful or they suffer from mental blocks or anxieties or fears themselves, then how can they work with you or how can you help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the easiest way to get started is to sign up for a no cost conversation with me. So, I offer free performance check sessions, and that is a 30-minute virtual call. And the whole point of that is really to discuss what are your goals, what do you want, what's your dream, where do you want to be, and then where you are today. And I want to have a conversation and help this athlete see how to kind of close the gap. How do you get from where you are to where you want to be? And getting them to understand what's happening so they can let go of that frustration. That's really helpful. And what are some steps they can go ahead and start taking to move forward? So that's something I offer. It's called a performance check session. You can get signed up for it at mgpcoach.com/performance check session. And we'll put the link below this video. We'll include it somewhere so that they can get access and get signed up for that. Spots are limited, so if they want to get signed up, if this is interesting, absolutely go ahead and get signed up, please. But it's a great conversation. I spend about 20 minutes with the athlete, then do a parent recap at the end for the last 10 minutes. And it's no pressure, no obligation. It's just, I just want to help you, talk to you, give you some things to think about, give you things to consider maybe you haven't before so that they can move forward in their skills. And then if they found it helpful and they want to know more about what the programs look like and what maybe the best next step would be for them, then at the end of the conversation, then we'll talk through those options together.
All right, that's a good option.
Awesome.
And
Well,
I know
thank you.
you also have mental coaching or other courses available too, right? And free trainings.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got tons of resources on my website. So if you go to mgpcoach.com, that is where you can find a lot of different resources. Also, we have a course. So I have a 12-week Mind Over Mental Block course that's available. We are going to be adding in some Q&A, office hour, like more live coach sessions. So to make sure that as you're working through the content and the curriculum and my 6-step Mind Over Mental Block process, as you work through that every week, you have an opportunity to ask your questions in person with a coach, one of my expert mental coaches. So that is an option. And then we're also going to be starting small group classes here in the next little bit. So so keep an eye out for information on that. So lots of ways to get support from us. Just get in contact with us however you can. But a good place to start is that mgpcoach.com, our website.